Tales from Tech Support. I've worked in IT on and off for years, and unfortunately sometimes IT staff can be the problem. Some years ago, when Microsoft bought Skype, I was with a megacorp's IT department and we were rolling out the first upgrade that patched Link to look like Skype. For some insane reason, deployment began the night before a statutory holiday weekend, perhaps in the hopes less people would be affected. Unfortunately, half our company was based in a country that didn't have a holiday that day, so myself and two other overtime guys, let's call them Jay and Bob, had to support thousands of staff. Jay was a nice guy who did his job well, like many of first line, not a qualified programmer but competent enough to troubleshoot, repair software, diagnose issues, and kick severe stuff up to second line. Bob, meanwhile, had dreams of becoming an engineer, but had no formal training and instead believed that if he wrote enough automation scripts he would be promoted any day now. This wouldn't be a problem on a normal day, because we just stick up a banner explaining the help desk is short-staffed, but the deployment went wrong and literally every user account was throwing up an error when launching Skype, and so we were bombarded with contacts. Jay figured out that simply deleting a couple of files in the user folder would fix the issue for the day, and so we bravely fought against the flood of contacts, until Bob decided enough was enough. Without telling anyone, he wrote a script to delete that file remotely, pointed it at Jay's laptop, and fired it up. Moments later, concern in his voice, I hear Jay ask if anyone else's laptop is acting weird. I cross over and sure enough, Jay's computer is not having a fun time. That's when, sheepishly, Bob admits that he deployed his script and that, rather than deleting two files from the user folder, it began deleting everything on Jay's C drive. Bob is no longer allowed to write his own scripts. I worked level 3 for a long time, and used to get called in a couple times a week. Some of the investigations were fun. Some were insane. We had a SQL Server cluster set up active-passive, with some kind of syncing technology between them, and the cluster was super unstable. Active would fail, the apps would auto-fail over, and then level 2 would be in charge of failing it back. We had a vendor doing our infrastructure and level 1 half, as well as backups. The number of times I'd hear them say we'll just delete the primary, restart the sync and then fail it back to primary was shocking. It was their default fix for anything and it meant running on a single node for a few days, with a single copy of the database. I was the broken record guy. Can't you just fix it? When was the last backup? Can we get a DBA on this? One day, the mystery corruption struck twice and we lost primary and backup within a few hours. Oh well, let's pull from backup. A few hours later we get the call, you've been waiting for, the backups are unusable. Please ask level 3 to rebuild the database. Rebuild it. You know. We must know all the data that's been added to it in the 2 years since the last usable backup was taken. Our business partners took the hit and we started from an empty database and we had to hear about it for months, rightly so. During the RCA call, one of the vendor engineers is stumped because the backup command looks just fine but the backup output is a very tiny file. They show the command on the screen and one of my colleagues jumps in. What is the T parameter for? It compresses the output so it uses less disk space. We added it a couple years ago because the backups were taking too much space. No, it means test and the backup only simulates a backup. It doesn't write the output. Yes, it tests it, which is why we didn't need to test the backups. Benny Hill music starts playing. Level 3 slaps the bald vendor exec's head. Long story, but I work for a high-end interior design firm that does very nice looking work, but they really do not have much mechanical aptitude when it comes to putting things together. We moved into our very nice looking offices that we designed. That story would be its own book, and the freezer/ice maker never worked correctly even though it was replaced twice. We finally got a different model which seems to be working but does not have the custom high-end molding that the rest of the company's kitchen has. Today the installers came to finish the molding, but inexplicably they did not have the screws for the handle. I just happened to be in the kitchen at that moment getting a coffee when my boss, who is generally in charge of facilities and the top designer, who can be really high-strung when it comes to this kind of stuff, were trying to solve this emergency. Seeing me, they realized that I must have lots of screws. So they asked me to look, and I turned to one of the installers and asked them what they needed. Anyone that has done any cabinetry knows they are generally very long, thin screws, and anyone that has ever worked on a computer knows you pretty much never see screws like that. So I said no, sorry, we don't have anything like that, and my boss gives me that I'm asking you nicely but really telling you look, and tells me that I have a lot of old computers in the back, so why don't I just start taking them apart at random to look for a screw that will fit? Yeah, no thanks. At that moment another boss comes by and they grab him to help with this great crisis, and in that hubbub I quietly make my exit, sipping my coffee. Several years ago, I worked for one of the top 2 hard drive companies, American Samoa Tech Support. I worked in the chat/email support team. We used Salesforce for our ticketing system, with a web form to submit email tickets. Our email system was one of those where you could not directly email the mailbox without having a previous ticket. If you tried, it would send back an automated response saying to use the web form, and close the ticket automatically. So at the time of this incident, our incident numbers were somewhere around 190,000. I had been there around 5 years at the time, and it had gone from about 112,000 to the 190K. Not too bad of numbers, but the numbers were steadily going up at a normal rate. We came in on a Monday one day and I noticed that the first new email I get has an incident number of 970K. Wait a minute. That is almost 700K more than we had on Friday. So I bring it up to management. They ignore it, thinking I can't possibly be telling the truth. I notice the numbers are going up even higher with subsequent emails. 10K in between my first email and the second. So I decide to do some checking. I do a search with a random number in that 700K range. I find an automated response ticket. I put in another random number. Same thing. Try about 5 or 6 more. Same thing. Then I look at where the mail is coming from. Mailer-Damon@blah.com, don't recall the actual server name. It's a response that this is an invalid email address. After doing some research, it turns out someone had put in a ticket, but mistyped their email address. So when we replied, their mail server sent a reply back saying the email address did not exist. Our mailbox sent back an automated reply saying we did not accept direct emails. Their system then sent back one saying that Mailer-Damon is not a valid email. Back and forth. Over an entire weekend. I reached out to one of the Salesforce engineers on staff I knew from UAT testing. I showed them what was going on. 15 minutes later, there is a block in the system for all Mailer-Damon email addresses. By that point we had pushed past the 1 million ticket mark. I was a programmer and management thought it would be great if we all took turns on the support desk so we could see things from the customer perspective. I was great at it. Before the customer was done asking the question, I could tell them what page in the manual the answer was on. Then, one day I had a call from a customer that wanted to know how an RGB function worked, change color of something. I explained that the function took a hexadecimal value and you had to or in the bits you wanted on and explained what each bit did. They were like, hex, binary, what is this magic? I was frustrated that I might have to explain these concepts over the phone. I had a better idea. I said, I can help you, but you have to follow these instructions perfectly. They got excited and promised to do so. I said, go to your boss, and tell him, you are not worthy of your job. 10 minutes later, my boss came in laughing and said you are no longer on the support desk. It was easy, back then, to forget that the end user of this product probably had no professional education in programming and were just thrown at a project because they were subject matter experts, or other normal ways normal people end up behind the wheel of a programming language. Because of recent backup threads. One of my first jobs as an intern was to back up the systems. There were 2 senior interns that thought I was not doing my job. So, they wrote a background script that would monitor if and when I did backups. I noticed this script and did not pay much attention to it, other than looking at the source code. Then one day, it crashed. Since I wasn't supposed to know about the secret monitoring script, I just kept on doing my job. About a week later, I get called into the boss's office. "How come you are not doing backups?" "Well, I am. And I noticed the script that the senior interns wrote had crashed. If you would like, I can help them debug the script and make it work again. I know what the problem is." The next day, the senior interns had to do the backups and I moved on to other projects.